Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Zena Zameta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and with partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening. We continue our series on toxic workplaces. In this episode, Trust Your Canary, the challenge of workplace incivility, we have with us Sharone Bar-David from Toronto, Canada. So what is workplace incivility and what damage does it create when left unaddressed? Why is it seemingly allowed in organizations? Sharone will share fascinating data about the collateral damage that incivility leaves in its wake, what each and every one of us can do to tame it, and what canaries have to do with it all. So that will be an interesting conversation. So Sharone Bar-David is a renowned expert on workplace incivility and is the author of Trust Your Canary, Every Leader's Guide to Taming Workplace Incivility. She is the president of Bar-David Consulting, a company specializing in creating civil work environments. Over the past 20 years, Sharone has worked with over 30,000 people in a wide range of industries through training sessions, consulting, coaching, and keynote speeches. With a background as a lawyer and social worker, she is also a regular guest commentator for the Canadian HR Reporter magazine and the author of a popular blog with a loyal international following. Now, we would like to invite you to participate in our chat room at Blog Talk Radio. Simply go to blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict-coach. You can also join us in our Twitter chat. We're using the hashtag ConflictChat. And you can also send Sharone Bar-David, all one word, to Twitter, comments and questions, and Texas TX Conflict Coach. So Sharone, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Patty, for inviting me. What a pleasure. What a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, we've met each other. I think I was looking at my calendar the other day, and it's just like we actually met each other 4 years ago when we were doing the work that we do, passionate about workplace incivility and toxic behaviors and hostile work environments. And I started following you and kind of keeping up with you and your work, and I know you've been with mine. So I'm glad that after all these years, that you can be with us to talk about, because you're kicking us off. Well, actually, you're not kicking us off. You're ending our program series this whole long month on workplace toxic behaviors and incivility. So I'm glad that you're specific to this. So let's get into defining what is workplace incivility.
So workplace incivility refers to those seemingly insignificant behaviors that are rude, discourteous, disrespectful. Think of behaviors that are low intensity, seemingly insignificant, where you're never sure whether or not there is intent to be rude or harm or upset or offend. So we're walking into an area that's very ambiguous, very hard to pinpoint, and where a lot of it is a matter of perception and, as I say, ambiguity, those seemingly insignificant behaviors that are rude or discourteous. Yep. And you would see those typically in any workplace. Just the question is the extent to which you would see it.
So I'm glad that you defined it in that way. And as we have our conversation today, we'll because what's coming up for me, even as you talk about it, is it's insignificant, and sometimes it's ambiguous, and is it really intention? So we'll carry through. So thank you for defining that. But before we go much further, what brought you to this type of work? Basically, your journey in doing this work. I had a couple of careers. I used to be a lawyer and then a social worker. And when I got into the field of training,
somehow my work led me to start doing harassment type of training. But I was never interested in the blatant harassment, the kind of things of blatantly sexual or racial or based on a person's ability or age, etc. But those more subtle things, the little things that you say in a moment, you think it's funny, but the other person ends up being deeply offended, maybe to the extent even that they might go and put a harassment complaint in, or maybe not. And then I became aware that there were actually people writing about the kind of work that I was doing and the kind of ideas that I was developing in my work. I found this whole area so interesting, and it so touches on what you do, Patty, which is conflict. It's that place where one person might not even know that they created a problem, but for the other person, World War III has erupted in their mind when they perceive the behavior to be an affront, maybe even assault of some sort on them. And once I got introduced to some of the literature, which is new, this is a whole new field relatively, once I started reading about workplace incivility, the works of especially two lead researchers, Christine Porath and Christine Anderson, I was completely taken, and I said, that's it. They provide the data that supports the ideas that I was talking about. They actually went and looked into how do real people in real life respond when they experience these seemingly insignificant behaviors, etc. And the findings that they had not only were staggering, but very much supported what I was seeing in my work across different sectors. My work took me to for-profit companies, small not-for-profit, and anywhere in between, and seeing how people are affected. So that's how I got to this, and over time, as you know, when one gets really interested in something, somehow ideas developed, and more people wanted to read and hear my ideas, and here we are now with lots happening in this field, for me at least. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's standing out for me is if the person who's demonstrating these insignificant, subtle, hard to pinpoint behaviors, then why should we care about incivility? If it's really that, not intended, they're not really aware, why should we care? I mean, what's wrong with people getting frustrated with some of these things that happen in the workplace?
There's nothing wrong with people getting frustrated in the workplace. We're all human. So we get frustrated, we have a reaction, but when we start showing that reaction in things like eye rolling or that snide, sarcastic comment, the little whisper under your mustache sort of thing, when we make that physical gesture with a hand, all those actually have a real effect. Or when we write an email that's terse. So I'll give you an example. I just got very recently an email from someone who said to me, and this is someone in a leadership position, who said, we were communicating about something else, and this person said, I'm just a bit upset all morning. Why? Because this person got an email from someone even more senior than them that was a one-liner that basically said, you should stop doing this thing that you always do with everyone, and then proceeded to make another short comment and signed, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And here's my person who's supposed to lead a whole large division. I'm obviously protecting the anonymity here, who is really wasting the whole morning perseverating, worrying, thinking about this. What should I do? Should I address it? Should I? And all those kinds of thoughts. That's a classic example of what happens when we experience incivility. We lose time worrying. In fact, the research shows that 80% of people, 4 out of 5 people, will lose time worrying after an incident. And this is, as we said, just one-line email. And half the people, 47%, will purposely lower their work effort, for example. People will want to get even. There are many things that happen to us when we experience that marginalization, exclusion, or belittling by another. And somehow these things don't get counted, they don't get seen, but I'm hoping that most of your listeners will know, yeah, I know exactly what she's talking about. This happened to me yesterday or today, or it happened to me 5 years ago, and I can still recount every second of that experience with full technicolor. We all have that.
So basically, one of the things you're saying, first of all, you wanted to, what I heard you normalizing is, of course, people are reacting to these types of behaviors. When people are frustrated, they act in a certain way, and then the other person, based on how they perceive it, could be greatly offended by it. And so, it's not. You're not saying it's not okay to not be frustrated. I mean, that's a normal reaction, a normal emotion reaction. But because this incivility, and you gave some very specific examples of these behaviors, eye rolling, snide remarks, etc. We've all experienced that. We probably have all demonstrated that because we're all human, right? And but you're saying is why do we care? Is that you're saying this research that you were finding about the lost time of this anxiety and this constant worrying, how people are, how it's reducing their productivity, how they might even start to feel excluded, especially if they're on the receiving end of these types of snide remarks or belittling remarks, or that it's not considered important enough by HR managers or the organizational leader. Are there other effects or impact of workplace incivility that you haven't mentioned already?
Well, one of the ones that often is not even perceived as happening is that the interface with the customer gets affected. So here, for example, Patty, think of this situation. You're a nurse. You are in the nurse's workstation, and one of the other nurses makes a comment just to say, yeah, all you newbies, get a life, or before you make an opinion, let's think a little in it. Let's get a few more years' experience under our belt. And it's laughing, and a couple of other people laugh. It's kind of funny. But you're really, really upset. Now, you have to go into the patient's room, and you're trying to collect yourself, but you're not going to walk into that patient's room with the same openness and focus. In fact, you might be so distraught that you might give the wrong medication. Or alternatively, you're upset and you actually go to the washroom to cry, and you're just there for 2-3 minutes, but meanwhile your patient at the other end of the corridor is pressing their pain button. They need help. They're in pain. They need help. But you, their nurse, aren't available for those 2 or 3 minutes. So that's one way. The other way is that people, again, some of the research suggests that 25% of people, that's 1 out of 4, have admitted to researchers that they took their frustration out on a customer after experiencing an event. So think about it. A person, first of all, has to admit to themselves that actually they took their frustration out on a customer, and then they have to be willing to admit it to a researcher, even anonymously, which is hard because that's like saying, okay, I actually took whatever it is, I actually made a third innocent party a victim of my internal state. So that's one way, It also affects innovation, for example. If you're sitting in a team, if your organization relies on some forms of innovation, and almost every organization nowadays relies on something that allows them to continue to exist, some forms of innovation, if you're feeling that your ideas are going to be curtailed by your colleagues or by your manager, that it's not safe to risk, then you're not going to put those ideas out. Why should you? Hey, why do I care anyway? Not to mention so we're talking about customer service, we're talking about innovation, and then just to look at a completely different field is the whole arena of mental health. So there's a growing understanding now that employers have a duty of care to provide an environment that's psychologically safe. But if you are already prone a little bit to anxiety or depression, or you're just stressed out and there's only an incy-bincy bit more that you can take, that eye-rolling that's done, or that dismissive comment, or the marginalization, that gossip that's said about you, that can do you in. So there's a lot of research in the area of social exclusion and ostracism that talks about, by a wonderful Kip Williams of Purdue University and his colleagues, that talk about the fact that when we are excluded, even for a short period of time, you can see under an MRI machine that the pain center in the brain gets activated. So finding out that people are excluding you or gossiping about you, for example, will activate that anterior cingulate cortex the same way if someone dropped a hammer on your foot. So I'm just trying to map here a little bit some of the, let's say, the far-reaching effects that incivility has. And it's interesting because when Bar-David Consulting, when we do our sessions, people come into the sessions typically at 9 a.m. in the morning and they're thinking, incivility, sure, whatever. And by the end of it, they're like, whoa, here's a name for things that we're experiencing, we have experienced, that we're seeing around us that actually matter. And that's really different than how they come into these sessions.
Well, exactly. You're talking about creating a psychologically safe place for the workplace, and that's very true. I mean, it is the responsibility of workplace organizations and leaders to create a psychologically safe space for their employees and for the customers to be able to engage, with the employees. Talking a little bit about if incivility is persisting, if it is continuing, it's having this kind of impact on customers, on employees, one of the last things we were talking about is that it's really the requirement of the workplace, the organization, its leaders to create this psychological safe space. So if that is the case, and incivility has this great impact, why does managers and HR not address it much more, I wouldn't say aggressively, but much more proactively and much more assistantly? If it is persisting, then why are they not addressing this?
We could probably, that question alone, Patty, fantastic question. We could probably talk about that question alone now for a couple of hours. So I'm going to just try and, really, because why does it persist? And I should say, just as a little bit of a background comment, is that wherever you will have human beings, you will have incivility. It is human. It's human to sometimes ignore someone. It's human to get impatient in a way that another person gets affected by. But the healthy workplace has a few things going for it. One is that people want to do better, so they're trying to model better, and they do look back and say, oh, maybe I was out of line there. Another characteristic of the good workplace is that other people have the ability in a mature way to come and say, you know what, yesterday that and that and that happened, that was said, and here's how it affected me. So the ability to constructively and professionally address other people's problem behavior. And the other thing that the good workplace has vis-a-vis workplace incivility is leadership that knows what to do, that knows to prevent and to act in a timely fashion. So we'll always have a little bit of incivility. That's why my book isn't called Trust Your Canary, Every Leader's Guide to Abolishing Workplace Incivility. Rather, it's called Every Leader's Guide to Taming Workplace Incivility. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, and I think this is what you were after, is why does it persist in ways that are damaging? And so first of all, often people don't have a name for it. And without a name, it's harder to pinpoint. So often people call it, we have workplace conflict. And yes, maybe it relates to workplace conflict, but it's a specific type. It's a subgroup, or maybe it interfaces with conflict. So there isn't a name for it. Secondly, very often, it's the senior leadership who models it, and it's management who models it, but sometimes it's really right at the top. So, for example, if people call us to do consulting or training work, and in the calls we hear, in the first call when we speak to our potential clients, we hear that it's the senior leadership who are the culprits and they want us to come and do training for everyone else, I kind of say, I don't think that's a good idea. Why would you come and have us teach everyone about civility when everyone knows that the senior leadership is not modeling it? In fact, you might be shooting yourself in the foot, and we wouldn't be doing the ethical thing for us to sort of take your money. So that's very often the case, and you may have seen this also in your travels, Patty, that, you deal with abrasive leaders, as do I. So sometimes that's the problem right from the top. Other times there are, not almost always I find, there are beliefs that pulsate in the background within the organization that enable incivility. So, for example, you see this a lot in healthcare. We're life and death here. We don't have time to be nice. I'm in the operating room. I'm the nurse or I'm the doctor. Just give me that thing and, give me that instrument, and we don't have time to be nice. So under that environment of in our sector, we don't have time for niceties, that then creates a very, very, very fertile ground for incivility to happen. In other environments, people talk about we're like a family here. Or in other environments, people will say, well, whenever you have these kinds of people, this is what you'll see. So, for example, you'll have women, you'll see a lot of gossip. You're working with miners down in the mine shaft, you'll see rough talk. Mm-hmm. And the minute you say that, you are automatically sanctioning that behavior. And one of the things that leaders could best do is, if they want to deal with incivility, is to start uncovering, start naming and discovering what are the beliefs that are pulsating in the background and start addressing those. And that would lead to all kinds of changes for the better.
So why don't they do that? Why aren't for example, so we already said that senior leaders, a lot of times senior leaders will model incivility, which creates this environment that makes it fertile ground that gives everyone permission to say, yes, keep being civil, right? So why don't HR folks address this? Or if they are addressing it, what's getting in their way?
Sometimes HR don't have the power to address it. They may be very well on point. They may see the problem, but they may not have the power to really implement change. After all, it's the managers on the ground and the senior leadership who have to actually make it happen. So HR, I find, sometimes despite really best intentions, can't make it happen. Maybe it's too big also an undertaking. Maybe it's already embedded in the culture, and this would mean a big culture change. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes HR people don't necessarily know how to make the business case for civility. It's a nice to have. Civility, of course, is nice to have, but what I think was going to make it top of mind is when people start realizing that the business case is so very compelling. If you have 12% of people who leave an organization who say, I left an organization because of a single incident that happened, that broke the camel's back, that's something to think about. If you're thinking about how it affects your customers, et cetera, some of the things that we spoke about, there's a business case to do it, but HR often isn't able to articulate that business case, or maybe not even see the business case per se.
clarify for listeners, because I think in the field in general that HR gets a really bad rap, which is very unfortunate. I think some of it really ties to what you're saying here. So for listeners who maybe have a not so great experience with HR, can you explain just briefly, when you say HR does not have the power to make the changes, can you expound on that just a little bit more? Because I think a lot of people who are employees think, oh, HR has all this power, when really in a lot of organizations the reality is they don't. So just clarify that a little bit.
So let's say that people come to HR and say, there's a lot of gossip on our unit, it's intolerable, and it's like everybody's at each other, and there's all these stuff going on and all these cliques, and there's the in-group and the out-group, and help. If HR, so let's say that you have an HR person who really gets it, and I work with so many HR people, and so many of them really get it. But now the HR person has to go to the manager, and then the manager may not get it. The manager might say, you know what, we have other priorities. Or, you know what, it's all women here. Of course there'll be cliques. What are you going to do? Or it's a multicultural environment, so of course the Filipinos stick with themselves, and the Poles stick to themselves, and the Asians stick to themselves. I've seen this happen. I'm quoting you literally from places that I've been that are, let's say, multicultural environments. Toronto, for example, is a very multicultural city. So you hear this in hospitals, for example, that this is what managers are struggling with. So now what's the HR person to do? They can't come and change a team culture. It is up to the manager or the team lead or whoever it is to take care of that. And for the manager or team lead, often they're really hesitant and gun-shy, for lack of a better word, to do anything, because sometimes they have on the team someone who's a chronically uncivil person who for years nobody managed to manage their performance. All the managers before them were kind of afraid of this person in a way. The manager would need a lot of courage to do something about it. And I write a lot in the book. I have a chapter dedicated to what to do with a chronically uncivil individual and what to do with a chronically uncivil team. Where do you as the manager start? And it's also very hard to start if you don't have support from above you. I'm hoping I'm not sort of jumping all over the place, because as you can see, Patty, this is so complex.
Yeah.
And so many forces are at play. We're only scratching the surface.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, and I'm glad that you use the word chronic, because some organizations or teams within an organization can have a very chronic pattern of incivility, either individually or as a team. Now, you were mentioning your book, and I'm very curious. I really want you to tell the listeners, because I love the name of your book, Trust Your Canary. Tell us about that metaphor.
So I think a lot of people know about the canaries that coal miners, take with them. In some countries they still do. In more of the Western world they don't anymore, because we have now other kind of measuring instruments. But essentially canaries are very sensitive to carbon monoxide, and so they are said to have saved more than 1 million lives in the last 100 years or so, where canaries take the miners take the canaries into the coal mines with them. And if there's poisonous gases, the canaries die, and the miners can run out and save their lives. And my assertion is that inside each of us resides this little inner canary that's the gift of our ancestors, that tells us, it alerts us when the line between what is kind and unkind, dignified and undignified, civil versus uncivil, respectful versus disrespectful, when that line has been crossed. and we feel it. We have this sense of discomfort that descends upon us. We don't know what to do. Sometimes we freeze. Sometimes we're standing there laughing at the joke, but inside our stomach is churning. And the whole point for leaders especially is trust your canary. When it awakens, you ought to do something, even if all you do is say, hey, let's not go there. Do something. It's actionable to you. Your canary is the gift of your ancestors saying to their children, now, you see your sister crying? It's because of what you said. You go fix it. Or good people don't do this, or our family doesn't do those things. Father to child, mother to child, grandmother, grandfather to grandchildren. And so we all have these finely tuned canaries. Some of us have more fine-tuned ones than others. I got to share this, Patty. 2 weeks ago, I was doing a session for a group of leaders, mid-level leaders, in an organization that is quite saturated with incivility. And one of them said, "Canary, my canary's dead." and I said, "No, your canary might be muffled, but I couldn't do this work if I believed that the people's canary is dead. Might be muffled. Let's talk about, But it was interesting because his point was, I've been here so long, I don't even know anymore what's okay and not okay.
Yes, they forgot the canary. It's muzzled. It's hidden. And it's getting them tuned into, what that inner canary is. I love the title. I thought that was very creative, and visually it connects you right away to those canaries going into the tunnels, into those coal mine shafts, and knowing, if it's safe. And that goes back to, creating that psychologically safe place for people. And so I know that we've run out of time, but I do want to make sure to end with, so if we're awakening our canary, slap that canary awake for that person who said their canary was dead, and that means taking some action, doing something. So what are maybe like your top 3 strategies? I know you've got so many, but what are some top 3 strategies, for example, to start addressing incivility? You talked about naming it, but what are some other strategies you want people to take away from today?
Are you talking from a manager's perspective or from anybody's perspective?
Any perspective.
Any perspective. So I would say, first of all, curtail some bad habit that you have. Are you an eye roller? Quit it for 1 week. You'll see it's a mammoth task. Are you sarcastic? Quit sarcasm. Put yourself on a diet for a week. Are you addicted to your BlackBerry or iPhone and do it right in front of people or in a meeting? Go on a diet for a week from one habit that you have that's uncivil, and complement that with making one kind comment to a coworker, kind or complimentary comment per day. Try these 2 things and see what happens just for 1 week. And if you have what to report, then send it to me or send it to you, Patty, and let's have some good time with it.
So that's actually a great assignment for the week, and because listeners who've been following us for a long time know we give them fieldwork assignments. So I really like that, which is to tell your behavior, your incivility. I love to put yourself on a diet from one uncivil habit. Stop doing whatever you're going to do, and then replace it with one kind comment per day. Now, is there another strategy for a manager? So from the leader perspective, in seeing incivility, or an HR perspective, is there a strategy you would recommend for them? For the week, I would say when you are seeing something, make a comment, whatever it is. If it's only let's not go there. I love the let's not go there. I use it a lot in my teaching. So it could be just let's not go there, or eye rolling, let's not do that. Anything, just take action, because if you're not doing something, you basically condoned it. So find whatever courage, and I'm not using, sorry, go ahead. Well, so basically, earlier when you said, trust your canary, do something, take action, that would be an example. By dismissing it or not acknowledging it, you're essentially condoning it. So you're saying to managers or HR, if you're seeing it, let's not go there, or really name the incivil behavior, but in a constructive way that shows that is not acceptable.
Exactly. Now, that takes a lot of courage, Patty. That sounds simple when you and I are talking here on your wonderful program. In real life, that takes a lot. So naming it might be, if that's too tall an order, do something in the moment, or later. Call them later and say, I want to talk to you about that behavior. It could be perceived as ... and it's probably better not to do that. Or I don't want to see that behavior. I would expect that behavior not to happen. Or anything, even if not in the moment, but best is to respond in the moment.
And of course, to do it in a way that's not publicly humiliating the person in front of a group of people. So we're not saying that, folks. We're not, if we're saying naming in the moment because you're seeing it in the moment, but if they're around a whole bunch of people, you're not there to then be incivil to them by naming it and publicly humiliating or embarrassing them. So that's your suggestion too, in the sense of bring it out later, have a private conversation.
I actually have, Patty, a whole chapter in the book about actually responding in public, where the premise of that, where the premise of that chapter is that when it comes to workplace incivility and certainly higher level behaviors like harassment, you do need to respond in public. But, and I give a very detailed account. This is the thing that I get most push initially from managers initially. They say, but I can't, but the golden rule is praise in public, correct in private. I can't do that. But then we talk about, but if you stood there and there were 5 people there and you said nothing, you actually said, go ahead. So I talk in the chapter in great detail about how to get it right. And the first thing of getting it right is exactly what you just highlighted, which is you have to do it in a way that does not shame. You have to do it in a way that preserves everyone's dignity. But, folks, you still got to do it, which goes against the grain. So that's a really important chapter in the book, yeah.
And a very interesting balance of how they do it. That will be a critical thing for them to do, how they balance it, how they approach it, and what they say in that. So I'm glad you have a whole chapter dedicated to that. Very, very good. All right, so folks, where can folks find you? What's the best contact information? So our website is
www.Sharone Bar-David or Bar-David.com. I want to say that this blog that you introduced in the beginning, I've written quite a bit and published quite a bit, and a lot of these ideas are expanded. So there actually is an article on my blog about doing this publicly, and and it's all free. So go ahead, enjoy everything and all these ideas. On Twitter, I'm at Sharone Bar-David, but anyone who will go on Twitter will see that I'm not a big Twitter person. People are welcome to join me on LinkedIn, where I am more where I live more on LinkedIn. And, okay, good. And we also have, if I may just say it didn't come up in the conversation, but for those who really want to do something and are not necessarily in management, because Trust Your Canary is a book for managers, we have the Respect on the Go toolkits. And these are toolkits jam-packed with strategies, hundreds of strategies and information, and they're on our website. They're actually now sold also in the U.S. on hrdq.com, but you can certainly call us or contact us via the website, and that will give you, oh my gosh, I have this situation with so-and-so. I'm going to pull out the relevant card and get literally phrases to say right down to that level that I can use, or things to avoid doing or saying.
Oh, that's wonderful. I loved your blog. I mean, you have some great stuff on your website. Not only the blog, I mean, there's just some really wonderful things that you have here. Now, folks can buy get your book, Trust Your Canary, Your Leader's Guide to Taming Workplace Instability, I assume, on your website, and can they also get it through Amazon.com and those sources as well?
Yeah, they can get it on Amazon.com. They can get it, if they're Canadian, on Indigo. It will be shortly on a website called Books for Business. So yeah, any of these sources. I'd love to have.
Okay, one.
You order from me, I'll autograph it for you also before it's put in the mail.
There you go. So if you're listening to the program, order directly, and she will autograph the book for you. So, Sharone, we are at the close of our show. I want to thank you so much for being as part of our series on workplace incivility and harassment and all the toxic things that happen in the workplace. What final message do you want to leave with listeners tonight?
The very basics, what your parents taught you when you were 5, what the kindergarten told us when we were in the playground, all are applicable to the workplace. It's all within reach, so let's just do it.
Very, very good. Sharone, again, thank you for joining me. Thank you, listeners who are in the chat room, who are live with us and in our Twitter feed tonight, and we will see you next week, everyone. Good night, Sharone.
Thank you so much, Patty, for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.